Back in 1994, when PlayStation 1 first released, it was a revolutionary console for its time, and honestly, I can see why. The console itself was rather expensive, and even the games and the titles that came out for the console were also quite expensive. No joke, the devs had to work with very limited amount of hardware in order for them to be able to publish the game. Like, everything, starting from polishing the game to making it look believable to making it look good. So the PlayStation 1 only had 1 or around 2 megabytes of RAM and 1 megabyte of RAM for the video memory, which we call VRAM nowadays. So with this limited amount of hardware, the developers had to cut some corners in between. So where were the corners cut exactly? So the most of the time, the corners were cut in the textures and the resolution, you may say. But one of the key places where the corners were actually cut was the lighting. Now, if you actually took your moment to analyze a simple PS1 game, then you'd realize that it didn't really have any actual real lighting. Or you may say that, yeah, there is lighting in the PlayStation 1 games. Well, you'd be kind of wrong and kind of right at the same time. Because back in 1994, when this thing came out, there wasn't really a way to actually add multiple lights in a scene. Or at least, even if there was, the PlayStation 1 possibly couldn't handle that. So what the devs instead had to do was go creative all around the place and try their best to replicate light as accurately as possible, because they had to make the game realistic and believable at the same time so that they can, sort of convince people to buy these games, because no joke, they were really expensive at that time at least. So yeah, the lighting was one of the crucial parts where the devs had to be really creative, which gave birth to some of the best and some of the very unique and creative lighting techniques, and which the devs had to come up with so that they can make their game look really good and stand out among all the other games. So yeah, let's talk about how lighting worked in the PlayStation 1 games. And well, this video is going to go a little bit in depth in between these gray areas. It can't be completely accurate, but I'm going to be trying my best to explain it as much as I can. So let's take a look at this game called Siphon Filter. It's a PS1 title, and this game actually uses one of all of these lighting techniques that the devs had to come up with. So let me just real quick address a few of them. So first one, which was the most common one and the very first one that the developers used, was Vertex lighting. If you take a look at these areas, then you'd realize that these particular areas are lit, or they're actually colored in white or a bit of a lighter color. And these areas are completely they're not actually affected by any kind of light or anything. They're just basically areas which have on top of them have a different color just painted on top of them. So what is this technique? This technique is called vertex coloring, and by doing this, they color on top of a pre-existing vertice, like the textures or the models. They just put a thin layer of color on top of the existing models to replicate light, the way light reacted, reflected, or the way darker areas became darker and the lighter areas became lighter. If you take a moment to inspect it a little bit, then you'd realize that these are not real lights. Just the areas which are supposed to be lit are colored with a lighter shade of vertex coloring, and that's how developers most of the time replicated lights in these types of games. Okay, so the next one is called Lightmap baking, or baking lights into the texture itself. This is another technique that the devs used later on to some of the other games, and by doing this, they could actually bake lights on top of pre-existing textures, and this would result creating some of the best photorealistic looking textures and stuff. This game, Alien Resurrection, uses this particular technique on lots of its places, and that's what allows this game to achieve some of the best looking visuals on the PlayStation 1 game or the PlayStation 1 console. This had a lot of upsides to it, one of which being that it really wasn't that it wasn't really resource hungry, because baking lights directly into the textures meant that you don't have to waste any other extra processing power on any types of lights or anything. And second of all, it was really effective and it made things look really good. But it also couldn't be used for moving lights such as, lampposts or flashlights. For those types of things, you could only use certain things such as vertex coloring techniques. And speaking of flashlights and lampposts and other stuff, the flashlight that you see in Silent Hill 1 for PlayStation 1 is actually using the same vertex coloring technique. It's not real light, it's just sort of like displaying a sort of lighter shade of color on certain areas when you turn from here to there. And this would allow the devs to actually manipulate or just make you feel like that there's actual lights in it, but in terms of real uh, real lights or so, there wasn't really any. PlayStation only had one light, which was the directional light, and the devs used this combined this sort of vertex coloring and baked lights all together to create the illusion of shadows, the illusion of muzzle flash, or the illusion of lights and other things. And basically, that's how it worked. Okay, now what does that mean for you, or for me, who's using the Unity game engine? Well, Unity actually has a built-in way of doing it. It's pretty easy actually. You just have to change the lights rendering mode to auto, from auto to not important, which actually allows you to create sort of vertex lighting, like sort of like a vertex lighted scene or something like that. It just kind of looks like that. Here's a demo of it, which I created over here. And for this to fully work, you have to actually do a few other things and some modifications to your models as well. So for this particular demo, I ended up setting up a simple scene with a candle and a sort of a wall and some other stuff with it, just to show you how this would look in actual action. I set this entire thing up in Blender, took me around 10 to 15 minutes, and then I imported it directly into Unity. And afterwards that, I went to open it up in Blender as well once I imported the model in Unity. And now I started off by fixing the materials and sort of changing the lights and other stuff. For this, you don't actually need any kind of shader. This will actually work with the standard shader of Unity as well, because it's just how Unity handles lights. So you don't really need any kind of shader for this particular demo, but I will be using the PSX shader. So once your light has been set up, just go into the rendering mode and change it from auto to not so important. As you can see, there's already some vertex lighting going on over here. As you can see, rather than per pixel lighting, it's actually lighting up the individual vertices of your model individually. And by using this technique, you can actually achieve that PS1 aesthetic lighting thing. And it's recommended to have like a smaller range so that it doesn't affect all the vertices equally. And in order to get a better look of this effect, you need to actually add more vertices to your model. Like I said, you have to modify your models a little bit. You need to add some extra vertices and geometry to your model if you want to see those vertices properly in action. I'm not saying to add too much of it because PSX had a very low poly models, but you might want to add a few to the walls and other things, which only usually have like one or two vertices in middles and stuff. So after applying these modifications, let me just show you real quick by adding a lot of vertices to just show you that it actually the way the effect works. And this can be done in Unreal Engine as well, but I have found doing it on Unity is much easier than that. So after saving the model, if we head back into Unity, as you can see, the lighting is much smoother. But if you zoom in and get the point light like a little bit closer towards your object, then you would see it lighting up the vertices individually. Let me just real quick show you. There we go. Okay, well, as you can see, it still has that jagged light effect, but it's since there's a lot of geometry, it kind of smooths out evenly. So you might not want to increase a lot of the geometry. I'm just gonna decrease it real quick. Just gonna undo this, and I'm gonna keep it at a minimum level so that it kind of gives us that charming lighting look of the PS1. At the same time, just staying true to its aesthetics. So after this, I actually played around tweaking, changing the light settings. I added multiple lights to sort of, eliminate multiple angles, and I tried my best because you can't actually use it on a huge range because that will actually kind of evenly distribute light all across the vertices. So rather than that, I added multiple lights and made it look just the way it kind of looks. It ended up looking like this. Okay, so now we're at the end of the video. If you made it this far, congratulations, and well, that's pretty much it. That's how I actually create sort of this PS1 style looking light effect. There are other ways, of course, like I mentioned, vertex coloring and other stuff, but those are for a different video or a different topic. I usually use this technique mostly. I don't even use baked lighting because when it comes to a PS1 game, all the assets and all the models that you actually see in the scene are like are so like friendly towards the performance that you really don't have to worry about the lighting or anything like that. And I think having the modern capabilities of a modern engine actually, it's not a bad thing to use dynamic lights or stuff as long as it looks faithful to the PS1 era. So yeah, that's pretty much how I do it. I really don't go for other techniques. You can use baked lighting, vertex coloring. That's up to you. But this is the very basic, the very beginner level of getting the charm and look of the PS1 style light. And I added some random camera shake and also added that shader I was talking about. And these lines that you see, these are the color what is it called, PS1's color rasterization or something like that. Yeah, but anyway, these are the effects and everything on play. If you want to know more about these, you can just watch my videos over here and there, where I explained how these things work, or you can just I don't know, do whatever. If you I don't really know why you would watch this video if you don't know how to get started, but these are very good videos. You can just watch these to get started. Yeah, anyway, see ya.